If you are buying into labels, you are absolutely missing the point. I'm going to talk about this in quantum physics scientific language and also spiritual language. If one language doesn't feel good to you and you don't really resonate with terms like matter and energy, that feels weird. Just take the good and leave the rest. If you don't resonate with terms like the 3D and the 5D, take the good and leave the rest. The language isn't important, the message is. If you're worried about the language, you're missing the entire point of this video and all my teachings that I've ever done. Separation and labels is just not the world we live in at its fundamentals. Let's start with the science, because this is something that has the most proof, if you will. In science, we know that matter is simply energy, and energy can become matter. And what matter is just molecules. Chairs, books, coffee mugs are all made of atoms, and atoms are made of protons, electrons, and neutrons. Protons, neutrons, and electrons can also be broken down even further, which we're going to talk about. But the point of me saying this is things that appear different in our macro reality, things that appear so fundamentally different, like how could a coffee mug and a couch be the same thing, are quite actually the same thing. They are made of atoms, which are made of the elementary particles, protons, neutrons, and electrons. And if you were to look at just two electrons, a coffee mug electron and a chair electron, they look identical. They're the exact same thing. You can't tell the difference on that fundamental level. It's only from our human point of view that these things look different, but we know they're made of the same stuff. This kind of reminds me of that parable of the two blind men touching an elephant, and one is touching its leg and it's wrinkly and thick and sturdy, and one is touching its tusk and it's smooth and curved and pointy at the end. They both are enjoying this elephant. They go home and they're talking about what they saw, and one of them is like, hey, I met an elephant today, and the other's like, me too. And then there's like, the first one's like, oh my god, it was so wrinkly, it was wild, and the other one's like, it wasn't wrinkly, it was smooth. And then they end up fighting about this because they're focused on the differences. But in reality, you and me can see it's the same elephant. They're all part of the one animal. They just appear different. But that's not reality. That's just appearances. They appear different because they touch different aspects of the one whole unified universe. So when we talk about atoms, protons, neutrons, and electrons, this is the quantum realm. This is where quantum mechanical predictions apply. In the quantum realm, or below the quantum realm, depending on how you think of it, there is a length called Planck's length. And underneath Planck's length, we absolutely can't predict anything about what's happening down there. We aren't sure. Reality seems to break apart. Scientists have some guesses, but our technology at the end of the day can't experimentally measure it, so no one can say for sure what's under there. The most prevailing theory in quantum physics, although controversial, is string theory. And the purpose of string theory, and a lot of the theories of the universe, are simply to find a unified theory. Scientists who really believe in string theory have been following this path because they want to find one unified theory. If we know that as we keep zooming in closer and closer and closer and everything we see, it looks more and more similar at the fundamentals, and we realize that as above, so below, the macro operates the same as the micro, and how the neurons in our brain look like the quantum physics pathways of what the universe is made of, it just seems like nature wouldn't have all these different chunks of reality. It just seems like nature wouldn't have massive, and then our world, and then the quantum, and then the sub-Planck length all operate according to completely different sets of rules. Many people believe there has to be one unified theory of the universe, and we just don't know what it is. So a lot of scientists who are pioneers in their field believe the universe is like the elephant and we are like the blind men. Maybe our current world seems like the tusks, and the leg seems like the quantum world, and the trunk seems like the smaller than Planck's length quantum world. But at the end of the day, there has to be something that's uniting all of these factors. And personally, I agree there has to be a unified theory, because nature does not do anything by accident and everything is interconnected. So again, this is all the science so far of how we know everything is interconnected on some level. I want to talk about one aspect of string theory, which scientists believe that at its fundamental level, it's possibly like little one-dimensional strings that dictate everything in our universe, and depending on which way they vibrate, they appear differently to us. This is an approximation, not like actual like how it works down there. Again, we don't know though, these are all predictions, but if you had one string vibrate this way, it appears as an electron. If it vibrates this way, it appears as a proton. Of course, the vibrations are more complex than that, and there's like literally probably infinite or almost infinite amount of strings. Let's listen to what that's saying. One string is just one string, and it could appear as an electron or it could appear as a proton, but it is the same string. It only depends on the way it's vibrating. Even on the most fundamental level of reality, you cannot get below Planck's line. This is the fundamentals. This is the unified theory. Scientists are predicting that everything is the same stuff. Everything is this unified world, and everything is just strings vibrating, and things that appear different, even fundamentally different, like protons and electrons, at the end of the day, they are the same. It's all appearances. Albert Einstein himself said, reality is an illusion, albeit a persistent one. He even knew that everything we can see in our macro world is not how it appears on the really micro scales. Okay, so science teaches us that separation is an illusion. And one of my favorite spiritual texts, A Course in Miracles, literally the first few exercises and teachings are all about how the world appears separate, but we are all unified by love. The first week of exercises, you just basically look around the room and say nothing means anything. None of this has any meaning. And it's to break down all these stories we tell ourselves about the world. We can't even see the truth anymore because we're so caught up in these stories. When an infant is born and it looks around the room, it processes absolutely nothing because it doesn't have names and labels and stories attached to those names and labels about what those things mean. It just sees a blur. Think about if you were to walk into a rainforest, you just kind of see a blur of trees and grass. But imagine if the top, New England woodland scientist, I live in New England, came into that same woods with me. That person would see so much nuance and difference. That person could see all the different types of trees and how old they are and what animals are probably living in them and the different footprints on the ground and animal pathways and plants and their medicinal uses and all kinds of stuff that I can't even fathom because I have no meaning for that type of environment. But that person would see so much meaning in that environment. And an infant looking at our world, we're like the scientist. We have so much meaning around us that are automatically applied. This can be great because we don't have to sit there and use brain power. When I want water, I can just get a cup of water. I don't need to use brain power to figure out how to do that every time. The Course in Miracles teaches if I look at a cup, to not think, oh, it's a cup, I use it to drink water, but to just look at it for what it is. The shape, the color, the texture, without putting these stories on what it's used for. If I were to give my cat that cup, it would knock it over, it would play with it would play with the sound, it would do whatever, bite it, I don't know, it thinks it's a chew toy. My cat has a completely different set of parameters for what that object can be used for than we do. And it's proof that we are putting meaning on objects and believing in their separation rather than just seeing how everything is absolutely connected to each other. In New Age spirituality, one teaching is, the 3D, the third dimension that we are in with each other right here, is all about polarization. And, the few centuries we were just in were all about polarization, good versus bad. Think about every movie you've ever seen, Harry Potter, Star Wars, whatever. It's good versus bad, and that's the whole dichotomy of our society and existence. This is good, this is bad, and there's no room for nuance. But as you move into the 5D or the Age of Aquarius or whatever New Age spiritual people are saying, those are just different languages to talk about a different type of living, so don't worry about the labels too much. All they're saying is when we move into this different type of world, it's no longer good or bad. There's nuance in every action. You can't just make blanket statements murder is bad. That seems like something that's always bad. But maybe we can all think of a case where, maybe you're walking home alone at night and a literal evil serial killer comes to try to kill you, and then you turn the knife and kill him first. You, in a different lens of looking at it, rid the world of someone who is doing harm to innocent good people, and you use self-defense to save your own life, and you have good on this earth to do. And now you can use your story to teach self-defense to other people. You can use your story to raise funds to to teach and educate people on how to be safer. Maybe you can help children develop that sense of self-esteem and positive energy so they never become that serial killer. Like, who knows where you could take it, but something that seems like a blanket bad thing in our 3D world has nuance as it gets to those higher levels of energy. In the 5D world, there isn't good or this is good, this label is good, this label is bad. There's no labels. It just is. Like, in those higher energy vibrations, you would never choose something that's like harmful to your fellow human beings or nature. You just would never do that. You're just operating at a level that creates such a more beautiful world for all of us. And Christianity is obviously a super popular religion, and Jesus teaches all that same stuff. Jesus' whole thing is love and forgiveness. No matter what your sins are, he is here for you to take your sins off the table. He wants to help you. He came to earth. God gave earth his only son, Jesus, and Jesus put all his time on earth to save us from our sins. He didn't have to do that, but he chose to out of love and out of forgiveness. He loves us. His only teaching is love and forgiveness. That's it. Aren't these all saying the same thing? I really love Dolores Cannon's work. Dolores Cannon was a quantum healing hypnosis practitioner. She has a method that she teaches people, and she helped a lot of people do past life regressions, where she would take people to their past lives and their subconscious would give them answer. They would teach them about their past life, and she would use this information to help them in their current life and ask their subconscious, what did this information come forward for? And she has so many books where she just did this on so many people, and so many of these people are saying the same thing. And one message that comes across is two big messages that constantly come across are, one, we are all coming from the same source. We are all coming from source energy. Just like in Christianity, we are all children of God. This teaches the exact same thing. We are all children of God. And it even takes it one step forward in Dolores Cannon's work, is that we all are God. We have pieces of God in us. Not that we are more powerful than him. No, we just are him. He would have nothing to rule over if we weren't here. And he sends pieces of his soul out to the world so we can experience the world and report back everything that we learned. There is one source creation energy, and this energy is all love. And can you hear the similarities between this and religions across the board? I think that separation is an illusion. There is no separateness. There is only love, and we all come from the same source. We are all just meant to love each other. That is all. Of course, science misses out on the love aspect. They don't talk about emotions when we're talking about what the world is, but spiritual texts all say the way to find this unified force, this unity, the universe is like a giant tapestry woven together, and that's what quantum physics and below also kind of explains, that, the universe is so vastly complex that when we look at the world through such a tiny scale, and when we look at it on massive scales like galaxies, it literally looks the same as neurons in our brain, and it looks the same as the descriptions that spiritual teachers describe, which is like the universe is a giant woven tapestry. And isn't that so beautiful that everything just kind of comes together? And we are all just meant to be here. The main point is separation is an illusion. So if you're buying into separate labels, you're missing the whole point of this video. The point is not to say, well, I'm spiritual, so I'm different than these other people, or I'm a scientist, or I'm a Christian, or whatever. There are no labels. Whatever label you're identifying yourself as, you're believing in the separation between yourself and other human beings. If you're saying, well, I'm a vegan and you're not, you're buying into the separation and you're perpetuating the matrix. If you're saying, well, I'm Christian and you're not, I'm Democrat and you're not, I'm gay and you're not, whatever label you are, it's okay to describe yourself, but it's another to buy into and feel meaning in that identity. I think a new energy to approach describing ourselves is like, I would say, I'm a female. Like, if I were to describe myself, and so a way you could describe yourself and still believe that we're all one is like, well, I'm a female. Biologically, I just am, but that defines absolutely nothing about me. That means no other thing about me. I do not have to act a certain way, be a certain way, believe a certain thing. look a certain way. There's nothing that has any definitive factor around that. You know, in Dolores Cannon's work, she actually makes the effort to say the higher beings were wondering why we are so attached to gender labels, because like, who cares? Because they're saying we're higher being souls, we're parts of God, no one's separate. But just when you come to Earth, you pick a body to experience Earth in, like a video game avatar, but you're not that avatar, and it doesn't matter what that avatar is. We just put so much meaning in these labels and our identity when we don't have to, and when we do that, we're buying into the separation. But everything you should do, or you can do anything you want, but everything these teachings say to do is release the separation and only trust in what's important, which is loving each other, spreading love, trusting God, trusting universe, trusting source, being a good person. And that doesn't mean following society's rules. That just means perpetuating love and loving thy neighbor. Separation is not real. Everything appears to be separate, but at its fundamentals, we know through science and spirituality, everything is the same. Labels literally do not matter.